You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hi there, Dr. Alex here. We are back with our advanced Podclass series, and we are on the topic of cortisol, which of course is super duper common. And we are talking about some of the root causes today and getting into the nitty gritty of tissue responsiveness. So just as a review, last time we talked about some of the most common reasons that people have dysregulated cortisol. They're trauma, blood sugar regulation issues, gut pathogens or systemic pathogens, and thyroid imbalances. So a lot of times I like to figure out if someone has trauma in their history up front. Now, I did not used to do this because I did not know better. And then there were some people that in response to the same type of support that we give, they'd respond phenomenally, and some people didn't. Now, what we were finding was that the people with trauma were often the ones that weren't getting better, and that is where we have coined the phrase, you can't out-supplement the brain. And that is the kind of real life learning Megan and I had to do with as we were working through women and figuring all this stuff out, especially for ourselves when we both have trauma histories, is that if I didn't help someone address the trauma up front, then those supplements are not going to outweigh what the brain has already decided. So a lot of what we've been talking about so far has been on the subject of, does the brain think we're safe enough to have balanced hormones? And oftentimes the answer is no. But again, we can supplement, help the brain out. We're talking about inflammation. We're talking about root cause for cortisol imbalance, right? All this stuff's super important. But the thing is, for trauma, we have to start addressing the mindset and beliefs we built around it. Is the world safe to begin with? Will we be hurt? Are we the kind of person that deserves trauma to happen to us? Again, all of these things really important to address up front. Otherwise, we can't get better. People cannot out-supplement their own very intelligent brain. The brain will win every time. So if you're dealing with trauma and someone's been like, we need to address it, I'm just going to be another voice that reiterates to you, you really do need to address the mindset and the beliefs that you have, because without that, we won't win that fight against our body. It just doesn't work like that. Now, the second thing that's easier to rule in and out through a blood test is thyroid imbalances. Now, we're really hormone experts. We don't specialize in thyroid specifically. You probably haven't heard us talk we're specific for thyroid. And that's because if you look statistically, many people's thyroid is off because of the wrong information their hypothalamus and their central nervous system is giving, and not that it's a primary thyroid problem. Now, there is a smaller subset of people who really do have primary thyroid problems, and that's what's throwing off their hypothalamus, but that is not the most common pattern. And so that's where we have people check thyroid. Now, the other two get a lot more murky because there's a lot more digging that needs to be done with them. So, for gut infections, that's for sure the most common thing, but it doesn't even have to be a pathogen like H. pylori or any of the other pathogens. It can be as something as, quote, simple as an overgrowth, as in there's too low good guys and too many bad guys. And I'm putting quotations around the good and bad. I just mean like beneficial gut flora or it's not beneficial to us. And so that can cause cortisol dysregulation. And a lot of times what we'll see on the Dutch, because it gives us the total free cortisol that was used over the day and the graph of how you actually use that total and divvied it up throughout the day. That's the daily free cortisol pattern. And a lot of times I call that the smiley face pattern, where it turns up on the corners. And that's because gut bugs, or bugs in general, for whatever reason, tend to be quite nocturnal. And when they are active, they release their trash, their toxic byproducts, of their normal metabolism is only toxins for us, right? Not for them. But when they release their toxins in our bloodstream, it releases our own cortisol. And so that's the kind of thing that can have a clue, but it doesn't have to have that prototypical pattern for gut dysbiosis or overgrowth or pathogen to be present. A similar thing can happen when it's a systemic pathogen. Like I said, Lyme, mold, viruses can all contribute to this because, again, they kick off problems with our own cortisol release because our body is correctly identifying that there is a threat, and cortisol is what really communicates that to our body. And so that's a biggie. Now, a lot of times people come to us because they failed protocols for Lyme, mold, viruses, SIBO, you name it. And that's because cortisol regulation and adrenal health is looped into how our immune system functions. So when our adrenal health is really low and our hormones are not getting made, it is really, really, really hard for us to fight infections of any kind. And that's why we really strongly believe as a value that we need to help people get the fundamentals down so that their organ systems can be optimized and functioning to the best of their capabilities right now. And then we can go in for the kill and all of the rebooting of the system. But so many times we see people trying to fight gut infections and mold and Lyme with essentially one of their arms tied behind their back because they're doing all the hard protocols, they're doing the diets, whatever, goes into it. But then it comes right back. And really the cause for that coming right back is that if our immune system cannot finish the job, we are not going to get away with just using antibiotics or herbals to kill something. So that is a biggie for people to really wrap their head around, is that yes, the two can get looped in. Yes, an infection will throw off cortisol, but a lot of times we first have to figure out why the adrenals were so low and then get them support, get the immune system up and running. And then a lot of times what we have found is that people can overcome a lot of things. Like for me, I'll just give me as an example. I did multiple SIBO protocols and the diet. I hated every minute of it, totally fed into my eating disorder, deprivation mindset. I found it really challenging and I kept failing it. And then finally, Meg and I had met. I spent a year working on that. And then I did one SIBO protocol. I didn't even do the diet associated with it and it was gone. So yes, I was one of those people that still needed to do a SIBO protocol. It wasn't like my body took care of it on its own, but I did not have to do the diet. It was so much more smooth. It was just so much more of a pleasant experience. And people had already been telling me hey, you really need to get the adrenals up and running if you're going to be fighting this stuff. But after I lived through it, it really changed how I look at it because the way I felt during it was so much easier, and I felt like my body was able to handle it, and like I didn't have to be as miserable as I had been for I had done it over multiple years trying to figure out what was going on. So I found it so much simpler and less crazy making, and so that has really become a big value for us to help people optimize the fundamentals and giving them the greatest chance to fight whatever is going on. And then the last part I'll talk about is blood sugar regulation. And this is a murky one because they loop into one another. Cortisol problems can be linked to blood sugar problems, and I'll tell you why in a second. And then those blood sugar problems are actually going to kick off cortisol issues, and I'll talk about that too. And a lot of what we do that makes this worse. So keep paying attention. So blood sugar regulation and cortisol dysregulation are common, and they go together a lot of times. And you know that because, if you're a person that gets hangry, or you can't skip meals, or you get lightheaded or a headache, or, like your family members know, like, don't let Sally get hungry, that kind of thing, there's something going on. So this is all happening. Both the cortisol problems and the blood sugar regulation are happening because the body has gotten into survival mode, right? That's the real crux of a lot of these problems. The body has decided it's not safe, and because it's not safe, it's not going to do optional things, and optional things are growing hair, growing nails, having good skin, having good libido, having good energy, right? These are none of the, and even having high quality sleep. None of those we actually need to live, right? As long as we're sleeping some, no one is guaranteed a phenomenal night's sleep. But unfortunately, these are all the stuff that we care about optimizing because that's what allows us to thrive. But we can't thrive when our body is in survival mode.
Quick interruption to personally invite you to come join us for our super exciting and incredibly actionable free video training series coming up.
It's a 3-part series where we cover everything hormone related that you ever wanted to know about. We share our top 5 favorite hormone helpers, talk through common hormonal imbalances, and discuss setting yourself up for success. Go to zestyginger.com/blueprint to sign up, or click the link in the show notes below. We can't wait to hang out with you.
Go do it now and grab a friend. We'll see you there.
So once the body is in survival mode, certainly the adrenals get that memo. So a lot of times cortisol dysregulation can happen there. But then the cells of the body also get that memo. And this is where when cells are in survival mode, I kind of think of it as the active shooter mode. Now, if you're not from the US, you're lucky and that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, but active shooter mode, I kind of think of it as nothing in and nothing out to the cell. Now, the nothing in part is really important because the nothing in is really talking about sensitivity and the body recognizing the action of hormones. This is why young people can have blood sugar. They ate, so they have sugar in their blood. Their pancreas works, so they have insulin, but the cells can't hear it. So it's a dysregulated timing of getting glucose into the cells. First it's high, then it's low, and up and down we go, on a spiral essentially. And that's where things don't get utilized. The blood glucose doesn't get used appropriately. And if anything, a lot of times it gets stored away in like muscle and fat tissue. And so we get this really unfair experience of where gaining weight, there's fat, that keeps getting stored, but we have cravings because the actual important organs and the tissues like the liver and the heart and the brain, they're starving. They want that. They don't want the fat cells to get it, but that's not where it's going. And so it's this really unfair, balance between being starving and feeling like you can't lose any weight. And I know a lot of you are kind of living through that. It's the same for progesterone. Like I, in the beginning, was being given 300 to 400 milligrams of progesterone, which if you don't know, that's a lot. That's a whole lot. And I was still spotting through it. So that meant my body was getting the progesterone, I was metabolizing it, but my tissues couldn't even hear it, which is why it didn't matter that I was getting it. And this is why I get really passionate about figuring out what's going on with the cortisol and figuring out tissue responsiveness, because as you noticed in all these advanced pod classes, we've been talking about toning that hormonal signal. It's the getting the correct instructions. But if the tissues of the body cannot get those instructions and cannot carry them out, it doesn't matter. And this is where I think a lot of people get missed. And this is where, people get snippets of the right stuff, but not a comprehensive plan that really supports them, because people are not considering what the tissues can actually even hear. So, that impacts cortisol, insulin, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, all of the major hormones. They're not going to work if the tissues can't be responsive. So I really think of tissue responsiveness as a triple pillars that help support it. The first pillar is the easiest one to get, but it's one of the hardest ones to actually implement, and that is eating food consistently. So a lot of women, especially, have been told, diet culture, they've heard all sorts of stuff. A lot of times what our job is to actually decrease the amount of rules someone has around food and just say, I would like you to get nutrients and building blocks consistently. So please eat if you're hungry, eat consistently spaced meals throughout the day. Have snacks if that feels good to you. Have a snack before bed so your blood sugar doesn't get low. That's really key, because if we keep the blood sugar stable, then the following doesn't happen. So this is when we have a dip in our blood sugar, normally the liver takes over for it. But when we have a problem with this blood sugar handling, then when our blood sugar gets low, then cortisol gets released, goes to the liver, releases stored glucose there to correct our blood sugar. But now what we've done is spiked our cortisol. For many of you, unfortunately, because you're under eating during the day, going to low carb, keto, intermittent fasting, all of that low blood sugar happens between 1 and 4 in the morning. And Megan and I kind of freak people out by mind reading a little bit, because we can predict and who this happens with. But when people are waking between 1 and 4 in the morning, there's something going on at that time. And a lot of it has to do with not eating enough and not getting enough food. So the whole concept of not snacking when after it's dark, or not having a snack after dinner, that's all outdated in the way that it only works for someone who has a great functioning hormonal cascade and their hypothalamus is working stellar, and all of that is phenomenal. But if that's not you right now, then that's not a way of eating that, at least right now, will be supportive to the body. And so we don't have a problem with intermittent fasting or keto in general, but what we have a problem with is a lot of the people who try those things are actually doing it because they have cortisol and blood sugar issues, and then it doesn't serve them. So really, we're all about eating enough, making sure that it's coming in consistently throughout the day, and is not one of those things where you don't eat till 3 and then have all your calories. All of that is a great place to start. And like I said, that's both kind of an easy and a hard thing to actually do. Especially if you have fear around food, it's helpful to start with that snack after dinner and to eat within 30 to 60 minutes of waking up. A lot of times that's kind of our foot in the door, because people who do that say, oh, I'm sleeping better, I'm not waking up as much, I'm feeling more rested. And then once that fear is squashed a little bit by the proof of feeling good, then people can get on a roll with it. So that is a biggie. Now, the other thing, the pillars 2 and 3 really just augment our ability to regulate this blood sugar and get nutrients and building blocks into the cell. Because like we said, we can do it through food. Food is a way of us communicating to our body how safe we are and what the state is. But we've been doing whatever we've been doing for years. Right. So from that standpoint, we want something that speeds up this process and gets us results faster. And so pillars 2 and 3 are there to support this process. The pillar 2 is really nutrient density. And this is where we harp over and over and over about getting nutrient density and variety through food. It's about eating, I always talk about eating liver or liver pills. There's mineral like nettle tea recommendations, right? We're just talking about powering nutrient density. Now, some people are depleted enough that they could use a couple nutritional IVs or an oral multivitamin, or some combination of the above. But what we're really looking at is how can we power and get nutrients into the cells, because those cells are shut down. And so we have to actually get enough nutrients that we have overcome that deficiency, and now we are living from a place where the cells are open to getting stuff. Now, the third pillar is dedicated mitochondrial support. So there are certain formulations that are made specifically for waking the mitochondria back up. And so, let's think through this. Here we have a stressed out cell that's not listening to its hormonal cues. So now it's not picking up glucose efficiently, and so the power plants, the mitochondria of the cells, begin to shut down. So now you have a dysfunctioning cell that doesn't even make its own energy very effectively. This is where I think mitochondrial support, when chosen appropriately, can be really transformative for waking the cells back up and making them actually react to the changes that are happening in the hormonal environment as we mess around with it, right, through protocols. Now, the other thing that mitochondrial support does is a lot of the commonly used blends for those also support trash taking out from the cell. So remember when I said it's like active shooter mode where nothing goes in and out. So we talked about all the nothing in part, but what we haven't talked about is the nothing out portion of this. Now, the nothing out means that the trash that's generated in the cell just from normal living mechanisms, that it doesn't leave the cell. So the cell becomes more acidic, it begins to collect its toxins, and now the mitochondria get impacted doubly. One from the lack of nutrients and building blocks, and two from the fact that the cell is now toxic in and of itself. Mitochondrial support, a lot of the blends that we particularly like also have help for detoxing cells and making them be more efficient at working over that internal environment essentially inside the cells. And that we think is really what helps people improve their functionality. That means all of the tissues are now starting to listen, everything's starting to work in concert, and this is really where the magic happens. So you can kind of start to see where we've really talked through many of the systems of the body, and where we're ending for right now is, can the tissues respond, and do they have the energy to carry out the instructions? And if they do, oh my gosh, things get so much easier. Things just really start to flow a lot. And so when women deal with cortisol issues, and they commonly do, we kind of go through this entire cascade and think through everything, and we're looking at the symptom panel to make sure that we're not missing a big category, because again, like I said earlier, if we don't address the root cause, those dominoes are going to keep getting knocked down no matter what we do. And so to really optimize our chances of success, it's all this root cause digging and making sure that all the systems of the body are happy. All right. Well, this was a really meaty one and a little bit longer, so thank you for sticking with me. And thank you, as always, for stopping by, listening, and sharing. There are so many women out there that need this information. There's a lot of people struggling, feeling like, I'll never get better. No one knows what they're doing. And so please help us get the word out. Please let people know that we're putting out this information. And also, please know that when you do, we are so, so grateful for you. It really means a lot to us when you go out of your way, take a little time to make sure that your fellow women are taken care of and feeling good. Alrighty, so on that note, we'll wrap up for today, and I will catch you next time.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.